Hello and welcome everyone. Today, let's delve into the epic story of Eike Batista. At the height of his financial reign, he didn't just walk the golden streets of Rio de Janeiro, but he also reigned as the undisputed monarch of the Brazilian economy. With an audacity that bordered on arrogance, he planned to surpass tycoon Carlos Slim and claim the crown of richest man in the world. But like Icarus, defying the skies with his wax wings, Batista flew too close to the sun. Instead of shining among the stars, he fell into a dizzying descent, taking with him an empire once estimated in the billions. But how could a titan of such stature collapse so quickly? Join us on an epic journey, where ambition, wealth and power form the backdrop to one of the most spectacular falls in modern economic history. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss our upcoming video. In the bustle of Governador Valadares in 1956, Eike Batista made his debut. From his very first moments, this future tycoon was already bathed in an aura of greatness, thanks in part to his father, Eike Batista, who was much more than just a man. He was a legend at the helm of Vale, the mining colossus. Yet despite this imposing shadow, young Eike was not destined to be a mere heir. Determined to forge his own legend, his journey took him far beyond Brazilian soil. His childhood, punctuated by his father's business travels, saw him grow up between Geneva, Düsseldorf and Brussels. It was in the heart of Europe, in 1974, that Batista pursued his studies in metallurgical engineering at the University of Aachen in Germany. After his immersion in the European academic world, Eike's flame did not fade. On the contrary, it burned with even greater intensity. Fueled by this consuming passion and driven by a boldness that sets him apart, he threw himself body and soul into the global markets. On his return to Brazil in the early 1980s, he turned his sharp eye to the lucrative gold and diamond trade. But Eike wasn't just a player. He quickly became the link between remote producers in the Amazon and buyers in the megacities, both in Brazil and in Europe. His ingenuity even led him to set up Ultramorum at the age of 23, a company specializing in the gold trade. What's even more remarkable is that this young company, barely a year and a half after its creation, was already posting profits of $6 million. So Batista wasn't just following in the footsteps, he was blazing his own trail, and it was paved with gold. However, his rise in the gem world was only the beginning of a much greater ambition. Indeed, his early successes in the field were only the beginnings of a much broader entrepreneurial vision. Gold and diamonds were certainly lucrative, but Batista didn't want to be confined to just one sector. He aspired to diversify, to explore, to conquer. It was in this spirit that, in 1983, driven by boundless ambition and remarkable foresight, he founded EBX. For him, this company was more than just a business entity. It was the central pillar of the colossal empire he dreamed of building. Each entity under the EBX banner reflected a facet of his vision. OGX, diving into the ocean abyss in search of oil. MMX, exploring the Earth's depths for precious minerals. And LLX, building a logistics network throughout Brazil. All illustrated his unshakable faith in the potential of his native country. For he saw more than just a country endowed with abundant natural resources. For him, Brazil was a land of opportunity which, with the right infrastructure, could be transformed into an economic giant. This just goes to show what a visionary Batista was, intent on propelling his country into a bright future. But while inside the economic arena, Batista played the role of architect of Brazil's future. Outside it, he cultivated a completely different image. Indeed, beyond his entrepreneurial successes, it was his flamboyant lifestyle that made the headlines. Sports cars, luxury yachts, bold statements. Batista was more than a businessman, he was a celebrity. In fact, it was not uncommon to see him attending social events alongside movie stars and top athletes. For many, he was the epitome of the Brazilian dream, a meteoric rise to fame, success and worldwide recognition. And it was with this in mind that Batista sought to transform his nation. He invested heavily in infrastructure projects, notably to revitalize the port of Rio de Janeiro. His Porto Maravilha project promised to transform a neglected area into a modern urban center. At the time, everything seemed to be going well for Batista. However, behind these apparent successes, problems were beginning to emerge, highlighting the weaknesses of his empire. And for good reason. His vast promises to investors, notably concerning OGX reserves, were hanging by a thin thread. Rumors even suggested that these reserves, once considered a national treasure, were far less abundant than he had initially announced. These doubts were far from unfounded. Expert reports showed that the estimates were in fact far too optimistic. With these revelations, OGX's share price fell drastically. Confidence, that precious ally Batista had cultivated for years, seemed to be wavering. What's more, its dependence on the financial markets to support its bold projects had become a sword of Damocles. Faced with doubts and criticism, the question arose: would Batista manage to realize his ambitious visions without buckling under the pressure? As these questions hung over his head, the economic horizon darkened. Indeed, at that very moment, the global economy was also entering a period of turbulence, with volatile markets and nervous investors. Batista, despite his ability to navigate these tumultuous waters with ease, seemed to be at the mercy of the waves. Every announcement of revised OGX reserves, every turnaround in the financial markets, every press article casting doubt on his strategy, added salt to the wound. At the same time, other problems were arising. His companies, once hailed for their innovation and potential, were facing operational challenges. Costs were skyrocketing, lead times were getting longer, and some of the technologies Batista had relied on weren't delivering the expected results. Doubts began to creep in even among Batista's most loyal collaborators, those who had witnessed his greatest successes. It was against this backdrop that Batista's relations with key investors and business partners began to strain. Negotiations, previously concluded with warm handshakes and toasts to the future, turned into tense meetings. Yet, in the midst of this storm, Batista never lost his flame. His determination, audacity and faith in himself remained intact. But the reality of the market, coupled with the disproportionate expectations he himself had created, formed a detonating cocktail. The countdown had begun, and the world waited to see whether the man once destined to overtake Carlos Slim could bounce back, or whether, on the contrary, he would succumb in the face of obstacles. But Batista was far from resigned. With the same determination that had taken him to the top, he was trying to reassure his investors, renegotiate his debts, and make strategic changes to his companies. It was a time when Batista's every decision and announcement was scrutinized by the media, both in Brazil and internationally. Media coverage of Batista was incessant. With every publication, the tone swung between cautious optimism for the future of his companies and worries about imminent bankruptcy. In this highly charged environment, Batista did not choose to retire. On the contrary, he engaged directly with the media, revealing his plans and vision. However, this transparency had a double edge. It highlighted the complexity of Batista's situation, revealing the challenges he faced, not only as a business leader, but also on a personal level. With each passing day, the challenges piled up. The horizon looked increasingly bleak, with mounting debts and a general atmosphere of uncertainty. At the same time, Batista's every move became a source of intense analysis. Experts from all over the world were scrutinizing the situation of his companies, distinguishing between threats and opportunities. Meanwhile, the impact of the crisis was being felt throughout Brazil. Companies that had thrived on its investments were struggling, and concern was growing for employees and stakeholders alike. The Batista Empire's situation has undoubtedly had an impact on the Brazilian economy, given the scale of its activities in the country. But that's not all. The downward spiral intensified when it was revealed that OGX had evaporated $45 million at the expense of its shareholders. With his reputation tarnished, Batista was prosecuted by the Brazilian justice system, which issued an international arrest warrant in 2015. At the same time, his assets were seized, and the world awaited his next move. But the worst was yet to come. In 2017, at the heart of a Brazilian political crisis, Batista was swallowed up by the Lava Jato operation, accused of corruption and money laundering. Batista's descent into the judicial arena culminated in 2018. After months of speculation and investigation, a judgment was finally handed down, convicting him of paying large bribes to Sergio Cabral, the former governor of Rio de Janeiro. The following year, in 2019, the stock exchange authorities hit him hard with exorbitant fines for insider trading, further deepening the financial abyss he was already in. Today, battered shareholders are seeking justice, hoping to recoup some of their losses, bearing witness to the tragic end of the Batista era. In conclusion, Eike Batista is a living reminder of the duality of the entrepreneurial dream. His story is a lesson in the importance of moderation, even in the face of resounding success. It shows us that prudence, diligence and transparency are just as crucial as ambition and determination. While Batista left his mark on Brazil's economic landscape, his story is not just one of downfall, but also of humanity confronting its own limits. In the story of his life, future generations can find both a warning and an inspiration, a complex mix of dreams, determinations, successes and, ultimately, bitter lessons learned.